The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness between stars like a glowing jewel. Its crystal towers stretched for miles in every direction, home to the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Inside the great council chamber, representatives from dozens of alien species gathered around a circular platform that glowed with soft blue light. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the center of that platform, his dark blue uniform looking plain and simple compared to the elegant robes and shimmering scales of the aliens around him. His weathered face showed no emotion as he waited for the council to speak. Behind him, 3 other humans waited quietly, their hands clasped behind their backs in perfect military posture. The first to speak was Ambassador Lixon of the Zephyrians. His body looked like it was made of living crystal, each facet catching and reflecting the chamber's light. When he moved, soft musical tones filled the air. His voice carried the same melodic quality as he addressed the human delegation. "Captain Morrison," Lixon began, his tone polite but dismissive. "Once again, your species requests admission to our military alliance. Once again, we must decline this request. Your people are simply not suited for civilized warfare." Morrison's jaw tightened slightly, but he remained silent. He had heard these words before, many times over the past 5 years. Each time hurt a little more, but he had learned to control his reactions. High Counselor Vex Tai of the Valdari floated several feet above her seat, her large black eyes glowing with telepathic energy. Her pale blue skin seemed to shimmer as she spoke directly into the minds of everyone present. "The human mind is chaotic and unpredictable. We have observed your military exercises, Captain Morrison. Your soldiers cannot achieve the mental discipline required for proper coordination. They act on instinct rather than logic." A low buzzing filled the chamber as General Crix of the Kron Empire spoke. His insect-like body was covered in dark green chitin, and his forearms gestured as he talked. "The humans rely on primitive weapons and crude tactics. They use projectile weapons that fire metal slugs, Captain Morrison." Metal slugs. How can beings who still throw rocks at their enemies be trusted with advanced military operations? Morrison finally spoke, his voice calm and steady. "With respect, General Crix, those metal slugs have served us well for centuries. Our methods may be different from yours, but they are effective." The chamber filled with what could only be described as alien laughter. The Zephyrians chimed like wind bells. The Valdari's mental amusement felt like gentle mockery in everyone's mind, and the Kron's buzzing grew louder and more rhythmic. Ambassador Lixon raised one crystalline hand for silence. "Captain Morrison, your species has been valuable trading partners for 50 years. We appreciate your agricultural products and raw materials. But warfare requires precision, elegance, and honor. Your people fight like wild animals, using explosives and crude projectile weapons. There is no art to your combat, no beauty in your tactics. We have studied your military history," added Vextai, her mental voice carrying images of human battles. "Your wars are filled with destruction and chaos. You target civilian populations, destroy entire cities, and show no mercy to defeated enemies. This is not how civilized beings conduct warfare." Morrison felt his anger rising, but kept his voice level. "Those were different times, Counselor Vextai. Humanity has evolved since then. We fight to protect innocent lives, not to destroy them." General Crix's compound eyes fixed on Morrison. "Yet you still use the same barbaric weapons." "Energy weapons are clean and precise, Captain Morrison. They can disable without causing permanent harm. Your projectile weapons are designed only to kill and maim. There is no honor in such brutality." The debate continued for hours, with each alien species presenting their objections to human military involvement. The graceful Aquari spoke of how human naval tactics lacked the flowing beauty of proper space combat. The mechanical synthery complained that human technology was too unpredictable and relied too heavily on biological components. The energy beings called the Lumina found human physical combat to be crude and primitive. Throughout it all, Morrison and his team stood silently, absorbing the criticism and insults. They had heard it all before, but it never got easier. The humans had proven themselves as traders, diplomats, and explorers. They had saved alien lives during natural disasters and shared their medical knowledge freely. But when it came to military matters, the galaxy's civilized species wanted nothing to do with them. As the session drew to a close, Ambassador Lixon stood and addressed the chamber. The vote is unanimous, as it has been for the past 5 years. Humanity's request for military alliance membership is denied. Perhaps in another century, when your species has evolved beyond its violent tendencies, we can revisit this matter. Morrison nodded stiffly. We understand, Ambassador Lixon. We will continue to work toward that day. He turned to leave, his team falling in behind him. As they walked through the corridors of Nexus Prime toward their docking bay, Lieutenant Amy Collins finally spoke. Sir, how long are we going to keep doing this? They'll never accept us. Morrison looked out through one of the massive windows at the stars beyond. We keep trying, Lieutenant, because someday they might need us, and when that day comes, we'll be ready. Behind them, Admiral Kate Sullivan walked with her hands clasped behind her back. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her green eyes showed the experience of 30 years in space. She had been watching the proceedings from the observation gallery, and she was tired of the galaxy's attitude toward humanity. Captain Morrison, she said quietly, perhaps it's time to consider that their rejection might be their loss, not ours. Morrison was about to reply when his communicator chirped with an urgent signal. He activated the device, and the voice of Commander Pete Johnson filled the corridor. Admiral Sullivan, we're receiving distress signals from the Outer Rim colonies. Multiple systems have gone dark in the past hour. Long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures moving toward the core worlds. Sullivan's expression hardened. How massive, Commander? Unknown configuration, Admiral. The energy patterns don't match anything in our databases or the Confederation's records. Whatever's out there, it's big and it's moving fast. The group stopped walking and looked at each other. In the distance, they could hear alarms beginning to sound throughout Nexus Prime. The elegant crystal corridors, filled with the musical voices of Zephyrians calling out in their native language, the buzzing of excited Kron Empire messengers, and the mental projections of worried Valdari telepaths. Morrison looked back toward the council chamber they had just left. Admiral, do you think they'll ask for our help now? Sullivan's smile was cold and hard. Captain, something tells me we're about to find out just how civilized their warfare really is when they face a real threat. The alarms grew louder, and emergency lights began flashing throughout the station. Whatever was coming from the darkness between stars, it was something the galaxy had never seen before. And the same civilized species who had just rejected humanity's offer of military assistance were about to discover that sometimes survival required more than elegant tactics and honorable combat. As they boarded their ship, Morrison couldn't help but wonder if the galaxy's definition of civilized warfare would be enough to face whatever was heading their way. Deep in his heart, he suspected it wouldn't be. And when that moment came, maybe the crude, barbaric humans would finally get their chance to prove that sometimes being uncivilized was exactly what the situation required. 3 weeks had passed since the council meeting at Nexus Prime, and the galaxy was learning what real terror felt like. The first colony to go silent was New Carthage, a peaceful farming world on the Outer Rim. The Confederation sent a small patrol to investigate, but they found nothing except empty space where the planet should have been. Commander, Alex Carter stood on the bridge of his patrol ship, the Defiant, staring at the sensor readings in disbelief. Where New Carthage had been, there was only a cloud of metallic dust and debris. The planet, its 3 moons, and the orbital stations that had housed 2 million beings were simply gone. "Sir," called out Ensign Tom Baker from the communications station, "we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian research vessel Crystal Song. They're investigating the Sigma colony disappearance." Carter nodded grimly. "Put them through." Baker. The melodic voice of Captain Thixon filled the bridge. "Commander Carter, we have found something disturbing at the Sigma colony site. The entire system has been consumed, but we are detecting massive biosignatures moving toward the core worlds. The energy patterns are unlike anything in our databases." Before Carter could respond, the transmission cut to static. The Defiance. Sensors immediately picked up new contacts at the edge of the system. Carter felt his blood turn to ice as he watched the sensor display. Dozens of massive shapes were moving through space at impossible speeds, heading directly for Kepler Station. "All stop," Carter ordered quietly. "Cut all emissions and go to silent running. Whatever those things are, I don't want them to notice." U.S. The bridge crew worked frantically to reduce the ship's energy signature, while Carter watched the approaching vessels through the long-range scanners. What he saw would haunt him for the rest of his life. The ships were not built, they were grown. Their hulls pulsed with veins of bioluminescent light, and their surfaces rippled like living flesh. They moved through space like hungry predators, converging on Kepler Station with terrifying purpose. Kepler Station was one of the Confederation's major trading posts, home to over 10 million beings from dozens of species. Its massive structure housed markets, diplomatic quarters, and defense platforms that should have been able to stop any conventional attack. Carter watched helplessly as the organic ships surrounded the station. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted less than an hour. The station's energy weapons fired continuously, their beams striking the organic hulls and causing bright flashes of light. But instead of damaging the attackers, the weapons seemed to feed them. The alien ships grew larger and brighter with each hit, their hulls expanding and becoming more complex. Then the feeding began. The organic vessels attached themselves to the station like parasites, and Carter watched in horror as Kepler Station was slowly dissolved and absorbed. The metal, the technology, even the living beings inside were consumed and incorporated into the attackers. What had been 10 million souls and a massive space station became raw material for the growing fleet. Carter ordered his communications officer to send an emergency transmission to Earth and the Confederation Council. The message was simple but terrifying. Unknown organic vessels consuming everything in their path, including ships, stations, and all inhabitants. Conventional weapons appear to strengthen them. Kepler Station destroyed, all hands lost. Fleet moving toward core worlds. The response from Admiral Kate Sullivan on Earth was immediate. All human vessels are to maintain defensive positions and observe only. Do not engage unless directly threatened. We need to understand what we're facing. Over the next week, this pattern repeated across the outer rim. Colony after colony went silent, their distress calls cutting off abruptly. The Confederation's military responded with increasing desperation, sending larger and more powerful fleets to confront the invaders. Each engagement ended the same way, with the organic ships growing stronger while the Confederation forces were consumed entirely. The Kron Empire launched their most ambitious attack on the 7th day. General Crix assembled a fleet of 300 vessels, their crews linked through the hive mind network that allowed perfect coordination. The mechanical precision of their attack was beautiful to watch, with each ship moving in perfect harmony with the others, their weapons firing in synchronized patterns. Carter was monitoring the battle from a safe distance when he received the transmission from General Crix himself. The Kron's usual buzzing voice was filled with confusion and fear. These creatures adapt faster than we can adjust our tactics. Our hive mind gives us perfect coordination, but they seem to predict our every move. They are learning from our attacks and turning our own coordination against us. The transmission ended abruptly as Carter watched the organic ships envelope the Kron fleet. The perfectly coordinated attack formation became a trap as the invaders used a predictable movement patterns to surround and consume the entire force. 300 ships and 60,000 Kron warriors disappeared into the growing mass of organic vessels. The Valdari tried next, using their telepathic abilities to communicate with the invaders. High Counselor Vextai led a diplomatic mission, consisting of their most powerful telepaths, hoping to establish contact and negotiate a peaceful solution. Carter monitored their approach from the edge of the system, hoping against hope that the Valdari would succeed where military force had failed. The telepathic contact lasted only minutes, before screams filled the communication channels. Not physical screams, but mental ones that could be felt by every psychic sensitive being within light years. The organic ships had not just rejected the Valdari's mental contact, they had corrupted it, turning the peaceful telepathic network into a weapon against itself. Their inner minds. Vextai's mental voice was filled with pain and terror. They're not just consuming our bodies and ships. They're consuming our thoughts, our memories, our very souls. They take everything and make it part of themselves. The Valdari diplomatic fleet was absorbed within ours, their powerful telepathic abilities now part of the growing organic consciousness that drove the invader fleet. The creatures had grown, not just in size and number, but in intelligence and capability. They were learning from everything they consumed, becoming more dangerous. With each victory dot, as reports flooded in from across the galaxy, a pattern became clear. The invaders, now being called devourers by the surviving populations, could adapt to any conventional attack. Energy weapons fed them, kinetic weapons were absorbed and integrated, and even exotic technologies like dimensional weapons were quickly countered and incorporated into their growing capabilities. The elegant, civilized warfare that the Confederation had perfected over centuries was completely useless against an enemy that consumed everything it encountered. The predictable tactics, the honorable combat methods, and the sophisticated technologies that had maintained peace for generations were being turned against their creators. It was then that the unthinkable happened. High Counselor Vextai, speaking through the few surviving Valdari telepaths, sent a message to Earth. Her mental voice was weak and filled with shame as she reached out to Admiral Kate Sullivan. Admiral Sullivan, the telepathic message was barely coherent through the pain and fear. We have made a terrible mistake. Our civilized methods cannot stop these creatures. They adapt to everything we try, they learn from our attacks, and they grow stronger with each victory. We need help from beings who fight differently, who think differently. We need your warriors. Sullivan's response was cold and professional, but Carter could hear the satisfaction in her voice. Counselor Vextai, 3 weeks ago you told us that humans were too uncivilized for military cooperation. You said we fought like animals and had no place in your alliance. Now you're asking for our help. The silence stretched across the communication channel before Vextai replied, her mental voice breaking with desperation. Yes, Admiral Sullivan, we are asking for your help. We called you uncivilized because your methods seemed barbaric to us. Now we realize that sometimes barbarism is exactly what the situation requires. Please help us save what remains of our civilization. Sullivan looked at the tactical display showing the Devourer fleet's advance toward the core worlds. In another week, they would reach Earth itself. The time for politics and diplomacy had passed. Now it was time to show the galaxy what human warriors could do when the stakes were this high. Very well, Counselor Vestai. Humanity accepts your request for military assistance. But understand this. We will fight this war our way, using our methods and our tactics. If you want our help, you'll have to accept that civilized warfare has already failed. As Carter watched the Devourer fleet continue its advance through the galaxy, he couldn't help but smile grimly. The aliens had spent years telling humans that their methods were too crude, too violent, too uncivilized for modern warfare. Now, they were about to discover that sometimes the crude, violent, and uncivilized approach was exactly what the galaxy needed to survive. Colonel Sam Rodriguez stood on the bridge of his ship, the Iron Wolf, watching the Devourer fleet through the tactical display. His vessel was nothing like the elegant ships of the Confederation. Where alien vessels were smooth and beautiful, the Iron Wolf was angular and practical. It had started life as a mining ship before human engineers covered it with armor plating and weapon systems that made no sense to alien observers. Behind Rodriguez, a group of Confederation military officers watched in fascination and horror as the humans prepared for battle. Ambassador Lixon of the Zephyrians was present, his crystalline form reflecting the harsh lighting of the human bridge. General Crix had sent his finest tactical advisor, and even High Counselor Vextai had assigned a telepathic observer to monitor human combat methods. Colonel Rodriguez, Ambassador Lixon's musical voice, carried a note of concern. Your battle plan appears to lack any coherent strategy. Your ships are positioning themselves in seemingly random formations, and your weapon loadouts contain every type of armament imaginable. Where is the elegance? The precision? Rodriguez grinned, his weathered face showing the scars of a dozen ground campaigns. Ambassador, that's exactly the point. You aliens fight like chess masters, thinking 10 moves ahead and following predictable patterns. We fight like street brawlers. We'll use whatever works, however dirty it is. The tactical display showed the human fleet spreading out in what looked like chaos to the alien observers. Ships moved independently, their courses seemingly random. Some vessels carried massive railguns that fired chunks of metal at incredible speeds. Others mounted plasma cannons, fusion missiles, and exotic weapons that the humans had developed. In secret, Lieutenant Lisa Hayes led the fighter squadron from her cockpit aboard the Lightning Strike. Her fighters were small, fast, and armed with a bewildering array of weapons. Each pilot carried different loadouts, making their attack patterns impossible to predict. As they approached the Devourer fleet, Hayes activated her communication. System: Wildcard Squadron, this is Lightning Leader. Remember, we're not here to look pretty. Hit them with everything you've got, then hit them with something else. Keep them guessing. The Devourer ships detected the approaching human fleet and began to move. Their organic hulls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns as they adapted there. Formations based on the previous battles they had absorbed. They expected the humans to attack in the same coordinated patterns used by the Kron Empire, or with the flowing movements favored by the Aquari. Instead, chaos erupted across the battlefield. Rodriguez's ship opened fire first, its massive railguns, hurling chunks of depleted uranium at the nearest Devourer vessel. The organic hull began to adapt, hardening against kinetic impacts. But before the adaptation could complete, Hayes's fighters swarmed the same target, hitting it with plasma charges and fusion warheads. As the Devourer ship adapted to the energy weapons, other human vessels joined the attack with weapons the aliens had never seen before. Gravity bombs that created miniature black holes, quantum torpedoes that phased through normal matter, and kinetic harpoons that dragged explosive charges directly into the enemy hulls. This is impossible, whispered the Kron tactical advisor, his compound eyes following the battle. They are using 17 different weapon systems against a single target. There is no coordination, no unified strategy. How can this be effective? Rodriguez laughed as another Devourer ship began to buckle under the chaotic assault. That's exactly why it works. Your enemies adapt to patterns, right? Well, there's no pattern to adapt to when every ship is doing something different. The Devourer vessels tried to respond, their organic systems working frantically to counter the human attacks. But as soon as they adapted to one weapon type, they were hit by something completely different. The creatures that had easily absorbed the coordinated attacks of their Confederation forces found themselves overwhelmed by the unpredictable human assault. Sergeant Danny Walsh led the first boarding action against a damaged Devourer vessel. His team wore heavy-powered armor and carried weapons that would have horrified the civilized species of the galaxy. They cut through the organic hull with plasma torches, then advanced into the ship's interior using flamethrowers and explosive charges. Devourer ship's internal defenses had been designed to counter the elegant energy weapons and sophisticated tactics of the Confederation races. They were completely unprepared for humans who used shaped charges to blow holes in bulkheads, flamethrowers to clear corridors, and assault rifles that fired armor-piercing rounds at thousands of rounds per minute. Contact front, Walsh called out as his team encountered the ship's defensive organisms, deploying countermeasures. What he deployed would have been considered a war crime by Confederation standards. Chemical weapons that disrupted organic processes, sonic charges that shattered crystalline structures, and electromagnetic pulses that fried electronic systems. The Devourer organisms that had easily adapted to clean energy weapons found themselves facing crude but effective chemical and biological warfare. Within hours, Walsh's team had cleared the enemy vessel and planted demolition charges throughout its structure. As they evacuated, the ship exploded in a massive fireball that consumed 3 other Devourer vessels caught in the blast radius. Ambassador Lixon watched the destruction in shocked silence. Colonel Rodriguez, your methods are barbaric. You use chemical weapons, biological agents, and indiscriminate explosives. There is no honor in such tactics. Honor doesn't win wars, Ambassador, Rodriguez replied as he watched another Devourer ship succumb to the human assault. Results do. Your honorable civilized warfare got you nowhere. Our barbaric methods are actually working. The battle continued for 6 hours, and by the end, the human fleet had destroyed 8 Devourer vessels and captured 2 others for study. The remaining enemy ships retreated into deep space, their organic systems finally overwhelmed by the foamed. Unpredictable human tactics as the human fleet regrouped. The alien observers struggled to understand what they had witnessed. Science Officer Thizes of the Kron Empire approached Rodriguez with confusion evident in her buzzing voice. Colonel Rodriguez, your tactics make no logical sense. Each ship attacked independently, using different weapons and strategies. Your fighters ignored formation flying and attacked from random angles. Your boarding parties used primitive weapons alongside advanced technology. How can such chaos be effective? Rodriguez smiled as he looked at the tactical display showing the retreating Devourer fleet. Officer Thizes, you and your people have been fighting wars the same way for thousands of years. Clean, predictable, civilized. But humans have been fighting each other for our entire history. We've learned to adapt, to improvise, to use whatever works. He gestured toward the captured Devourer vessels being towed by human ships. These creatures are smart. They can adapt to any strategy, counter any tactic, absorb any technology. But they can't adapt to no strategy. When every ship is doing something different, when every weapon behaves unpredictably, when every attack comes from an unexpected angle, there's nothing to counter. High Counselor Vex Stai's telepathic voice filled the bridge, carrying a mixture of amazement and horror. Colonel Rodriguez, we have monitored your thoughts during the battle. Your minds are indeed chaotic, but that chaos is your strength. You do not think in patterns that can be predicted or countered. You adapt moment by moment, changing your methods as the situation requires. That's right, Counselor Rodriguez. Nodded. You called us uncivilized because we don't follow your rules of warfare. But those rules assume you're fighting enemies who also follow the rules. When you face something that doesn't play by any rules at all, you need fighters who are willing to break every rule to win. As the human fleet prepared to return to Confederation space, Rodriguez received a priority transmission from Admiral Kate Sullivan. Her face appeared on the main screen, showing the strain of coordinating humanity's first major military operation in galactic space. Outstanding work, Colonel Rodriguez. Your success has bought us time to study the captured Devourer vessels and plan our next move. But I'm afraid the situation is worse than we thought. Our deep space sensors have detected the main Devourer fleet, and it's massive. Millions of ships, all heading toward the core worlds. Rodriguez felt his smile fade as the true scope of the threat became clear. How long do we have, Admiral? 3 weeks at most before they reach the inner systems. Colonel, what you accomplished here today proves that human tactics can work against these creatures. But the main fleet is going to require everything we've got, and probably more than that. As the transmission ended, Rodriguez looked at the alien observers who had witnessed the battle. Their expressions showed a mixture of hope and fear. They had finally seen warfare that could defeat the Devourers, but it was warfare that violated every principle they held sacred. Colonel Rodriguez, Ambassador Lixon said quietly, will your methods be enough to stop the main fleet? Rodriguez was silent for a long moment, considering the question. Finally, he spoke, his voice grim but determined. Ambassador, we're about to find out just how uncivilized humans can be when our backs are against the wall. General Rick Stone stood before a gathering of the galaxy's finest military officers, knowing that what he was about to propose would horrify half of them and confuse the rest. The war room aboard Nexus Prime buzzed with the sounds of dozens of different species trying to understand human combat doctrine. Crystal chimes from the Zephyrians mixed with the telepathic whispers of the Valdarai and the mechanical buzzing of the Kron Empire representatives. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings, Stone began, his gruff voice cutting through the alien sounds. Colonel Rodriguez's victory proves that human tactics can work against the Devourers. But we have a problem. You can't fight like humans. Because you're not human. Ambassador Lixon's crystalline form shimmered with confusion. General Stone, surely your tactical principles can be taught to our forces. We are intelligent beings capable of learning new strategies. Stone shook his head. Ambassador, it's not about intelligence. It's about mindset. Humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years, and we've learned one simple truth. There are no rules when survival is at stake. You people have rules for everything. Honor codes, engagement protocols, acceptable weapon types. Those rules make you predictable. To demonstrate his point, Stone activated a tactical simulation showing the recent battle against the Devourer scout fleet. The display showed human ships moving in seemingly random patterns, each vessel using different weapons and tactics. Watch this carefully, Stone said as the simulation played. Every human ship captain is making independent decisions based on the immediate situation. They're not following a master plan or coordinating through a central command structure. They're adapting moment by moment. General Crix of the Kron Empire buzzed with frustration. But General Stone, how can such chaos be effective? Our hive mind coordination allows perfect synchronization between thousands of vessels. Surely organized. Tactics are superior to random individual actions. That's exactly the problem, General, Stone replied. Your coordination is perfect, which makes it perfectly predictable. The Devourers adapted to your tactics within minutes because they could analyze your patterns. Humans don't have patterns to analyze. High Counselor Vextai projected her thoughts into the room. General Stone, we have attempted to implement your tactical suggestions, but our forces cannot function without proper coordination. The Valdari mind link requires synchronized thought patterns. When we attempt to fight chaotically, our telepathic network becomes disrupted and useless. Stone had expected this response. For the past 2 weeks, he had been working with Confederation military units, trying to teach them human combat methods. The results had been uniformly disastrous. The Zephyrians could not comprehend using crude kinetic weapons alongside their elegant energy systems. The Valdari's telepathic coordination became a liability when they tried to act independently. The Kron Empire's hive mind approach made individual initiative impossible. The simple truth, Stone continued, is that you can't fight like humans because your entire military culture is built around concepts that humans abandoned long ago. You fight for honor, we fight to win. You use elegant tactics, we use whatever works. You follow rules of engagement, we make up new rules as we go. While Stone struggled with training alien forces, Captain Beth Morgan was leading a reconnaissance mission deep into Devourer territory. Her ship, the Ghost Rider, was a testament to human engineering philosophy. Instead of elegant cloaking fields like other species used, the Ghost Rider employed crude but effective stealth technology, sensor-dampening coatings, heat-masking systems, and electronic warfare suites that confused rather than concealed, crept through the outer edges of what had once been the Sigma colony system, her sensors probing for signs of Devourer activity. What she found made her blood run cold. Where the colony had been, a massive organic structure now floated in space, its tendrils reaching out to consume the debris of 3 different star systems. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Paul Hayes from the sensor station. "That thing must be the size of a small moon." Morgan studied the biostation through her ship's enhanced sensors. The structure was clearly growing, adding new sections as it consumed more matter. Docking bays along its surface were birthing new Devourer vessels at an alarming rate. Hundreds of ships emerged every hour, each one larger and more complex than the last. "Hayes, get me a full sensor sweep of that thing. I want to know everything about it. Power sources, structural weaknesses, defensive capabilities. And patch me through to Admiral Sullivan on a secure channel." The intelligence that Morgan gathered was devastating. The biostation was not just a shipyard. It was a processing center that consumed entire star systems and converted the matter into new Devourer vessels. The rate of construction suggested that the enemy fleet would soon number in the millions, with each new ship incorporating the tactical knowledge absorbed from previous battles. Admiral Kate Sullivan received Morgan's report in her command center. On Earth, surrounded by holographic displays showing the advancing Devourer fleet, the news was worse than anyone had imagined. Not only were the Devourers building new ships at an incredible rate, but they were also adapting their vessel designs based on the human tactics they had encountered. "Admiral," Captain Tony Martinez said from across the room, "our deep space." Sensors confirm Captain Morgan's report. The main Devourer fleet has grown to over 2 million vessels and is accelerating toward the core worlds. At current speed, they'll reach Earth in 10 days. Sullivan studied the tactical projections with growing concern. Even with human tactical advantages, the numbers are overwhelming. The entire Confederation fleet, including all human vessels, numbered fewer than 50,000 ships. They were outnumbered 40 to 1 by an enemy that was learning from every encounter. It was Commander Pete Johnson who proposed the unthinkable solution. His weathered face was grim, as he approached Sullivan's command station. "Admiral, we've been thinking about this all wrong. We're trying to fight a conventional war against an unconventional enemy. But what if we stop trying to fight them ship to ship?" Sullivan looked up from the tactical displays. "What are you suggesting, Commander?" Johnson activated a holographic star chart, showing the Devourer biostation and the surrounding space. The biostation is consuming the local star to power its construction operations. It's positioned close to the star's corona to maximize energy absorption. What if we could destabilize the star itself? The command center fell silent as Johnson's implications became clear. Sullivan felt a chill run down her spine as she realized what he was proposing. "You're talking about triggering a stellar collapse. That would destroy the entire system." "Yes, Admiral. It would also destroy every Devourer ship and facility in the system. We're talking about eliminating their primary construction facility and probably half their current fleet in one strike." The room erupted in shocked discussion. Admiral Marcus Webb, Sullivan's second-in-command, voiced the objection that everyone was thinking. "Pete, you're talking about destroying an entire star system. That goes against every principle of civilized warfare. The environmental damage alone would be catastrophic." Johnson's expression was hard as granite. "Admiral Webb, civilized warfare has gotten us nowhere. The Devourers don't follow our rules, and they're winning because of it. If we want to save the galaxy, we need to be willing to do what they won't expect. Fight dirtier than they do." Sullivan looked around the command center at her staff officers. She could see the mixture of horror and desperation in their faces. What Johnson was proposing violated every principle that the Confederation held sacred. It was indiscriminate, destructive, and utterly without honor. But it might also be the only way to stop the Devourers before they consumed every inhabited world in the galaxy. "Commander Johnson," Sullivan said slowly, "do we have the capability to trigger a stellar collapse?" "Theoretically, yes. Our physicists have been working on stellar engineering projects for decades. We have the knowledge and the technology to build what we're calling a stellar detonator. The device would be inserted into the star's core and would trigger a cascade reaction leading to nova collapse." Sullivan was quiet for a long moment, considering the implications. Finally, she spoke, her voice heavy with the weight of command. "How long would it take to build this weapon?" 7 days, Admiral. But the Devourer fleet will reach the core worlds in 10 days. We'd have to deploy it while their main construction facility is still operational." Sullivan nodded grimly. "Begin construction immediately. And Commander, this operation is classified at the highest levels. Only essential personnel are to know about the stellar detonator." As Johnson left to coordinate the weapon's construction, Sullivan found herself facing the most difficult decision of her career. She activated her communication system and sent a priority message to the Confederation Council on Nexus Prime. The response came within hours. Ambassador Lixon's crystalline form appeared on the holographic display, flanked by representatives from every major species in the galaxy. His musical voice carried a note of horror that Sullivan had never heard before. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Redemption, watching the massive Devourer biostation growing larger on the tactical display. The human dreadnought was a monument to everything the galaxy found uncivilized about human warfare. Its hull bristled with weapons that ranged from primitive railguns to exotic quantum disruptors, all controlled by targeting systems that prioritized effectiveness over elegance. Around the Redemption, the combined human fleet spread out in their characteristic chaotic formation. Each ship moved independently, following no predetermined pattern that the enemy could analyze and counter. It was the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. 200 vessels carrying the hopes of an entire galaxy. "Admiral," Captain Tony Martinez called from the communication station, "all teams report ready for deployment. The stellar detonator is loaded and Captain Johnson's team is standing by for insertion. Sullivan nodded, her gray eyes fixed on the swirling mass of Devourer ships surrounding the biostation. Intelligence estimates put the enemy force at over 50,000 vessels, all of them larger and more sophisticated than the scouts they had faced before. The creatures had been learning from every encounter, adapting their ships and tactics based on absorbed knowledge. "Commander Lisa Hayes," Sullivan spoke into her headset, "your fighter wings are authorized to begin the diversionary attack. Make it look convincing, but keep them focused on the outer defenses." Hayes's voice crackled back from her fighter cockpit. "Understood, Admiral. Wildcard Squadron, you heard the lady. Time to give these things something to think about." The human fighters screamed toward the biostation in loose formations that made no tactical sense to conventional military doctrine. Each pilot carried a different loadout and flew with an individual style that would have horrified the coordination-obsessed aliens. But as they engaged the Devourer outer defenses, their chaotic approach began to show its effectiveness. The enemy vessels tried to adapt their defensive patterns to counter the fighter attack, but found themselves constantly off balance. Just as they adjusted to plasma-armed fighters attacking from above, kinetic bombers would strike from below. When they hardened their hulls against missile impacts, fighters would switch to energy weapons and hit them from unexpected angles. Hayes's fighters created chaos around the biostation's perimeter. Sergeant Mike Turner led the most dangerous mission of the war. His boarding parties were tasked with fighting their way through the station's interior, defenses to clear a path for Captain Johnson's demolition team. Turner's soldiers wore powered armor that looked crude compared to the elegant environmental suits used by other species. But the human armor was designed for one purpose: keeping the wearer alive in the most hostile environments imaginable. As they cut through the biostation's organic hull with plasma torches, Turner could hear the structure responding to their presence. "Contact front," called out Corporal Nancy Davis as the first Devourer defense organisms appeared in the corridor ahead. The creatures were unlike anything in the Confederation's military databases. Part machine, part biological horror, and completely adapted for killing intruders. Turner's response would have appalled the civilized species of the galaxy. Instead of using sophisticated energy weapons or attempting to communicate with the creatures, his team deployed every dirty trick human soldiers had developed over centuries of warfare. Flamethrowers filled the corridor with burning chemical compounds that disrupted the organism's biological processes. Sonic grenades shattered their crystalline components with focused sound waves. And when those methods failed, the humans simply used overwhelming firepower to blast their way through. "Turner to Admiral Sullivan." The sergeant's voice was calm, despite the chaos around him. "We've cleared the primary access corridor. Captain Johnson's team can proceed to the stellar core interface." Captain Johnson led his demolition team deeper into the biostation, carrying the stellar detonator that represented humanity's most desperate gamble. The device was smaller than expected, about the size of a briefcase, but its potential for destruction was beyond imagination. As they moved through the station's organic corridors, Johnson couldn't help but marvel at the alien construction. The walls pulsed with bioluminescent veins, and the air itself seemed alive with microscopic organisms. It was beautiful in its own horrifying way, and Johnson almost felt guilty about what he was about to do to it. "Sir," called out Lieutenant Steve Parker from the navigation station, "we're approaching the stellar interface chamber. The biostation is drawing energy directly from the star's corona through some kind of organic conduit system." Johnson nodded. As they entered the vast chamber at the station's heart, the stellar interface stretched before them like a living cathedral, its organic components channeling the star's energy to power the ship construction bays throughout the station. It was an achievement that represented thousands of years of evolutionary development. and Johnson was about to destroy it all. "Deploy the detonator," he ordered quietly. "Set it for a 30-minute delay. That should give us time to get clear before the cascade reaction begins." As his team worked to install the device, Johnson received an urgent transmission from Admiral Sullivan. "Captain Johnson, we have a problem. The Devourers have detected our true objective. They're pulling ships back from the diversionary attack. To protect the biostation, you need to get out of there now." But it was too late. As Johnson's team tried to retreat, they found their escape route blocked by Devourer defense organisms that had adapted specifically to counter human boarding. Tactics. The creatures had learned from previous encounters, developing countermeasures for human weapons and armor. "Admiral," Johnson's voice was steady despite his desperate situation, "we're trapped in the stellar interface chamber. The detonator is armed and counting down, but we can't reach the extraction point." Sullivan felt her heart sink as she realized what Johnson was telling her. His team was trapped in the biostation with a weapon that would destroy the entire star system in less than 30 minutes. There was no way to extract them in time. "Tony," she called to Captain Martinez, "can we abort the detonator remotely?" Martinez shook his head. "Negative, Admiral. The device was designed to be tamper-proof once armed. There's no way to stop the countdown." On the biostation, Johnson's team made their final stand in the stellar interface chamber. They had volunteered for a suicide mission without knowing it, but not one of them showed any sign of regret. They were human warriors facing impossible odds, and they would go down fighting. "Turner, Hayes, all units." Johnson spoke into his communicator. "This is Captain Johnson. The package is delivered and armed. All personnel are to evacuate the system immediately. Don't wait for us." The response from his fellow soldiers was immediate and unanimous. "Negative, Captain. We don't leave people behind." But Johnson's sacrifice had given the human fleet the victory they needed. As the stellar detonator counted down, Admiral Sullivan ordered the general retreat. Human ships throughout the system began jumping to hyperspace, carrying with them the knowledge that they had succeeded in their impossible mission. Captain Joe Parker of the heavy cruiser Last Stand volunteered to coordinate the rear guard action, buying precious time for the evacuation. His ship and a dozen others stayed behind to hold off the Devourer pursuit while the rest of the fleet escaped. "Admiral Sullivan." Parker's voice was calm as his ship took devastating fire from the approaching enemy vessels. "It's been an honor serving with you. Tell the galaxy the humans know how to finish a fight." The stellar detonator reached zero as Parker's ship was finally overwhelmed. The reaction began deep in the star's core, a cascade of fusion processes that would lead to nova collapse within hours. The biostation, with its millions of construction organisms and thousands of newly built ships, was caught in the initial blast wave. Admiral Sullivan watched from the edge of the system as the star began its death throes. The explosion would be visible for thousands of light years, a beacon that would announce to the galaxy that humanity had succeeded where civilized warfare had failed. The Devourer fleet, caught between the expanding nova and the retreating human forces, was systematically destroyed. Ships that had seemed invincible just hours before were consumed by the very stellar energy they had tried to harness. The biostation, the construction facilities, and nearly 2 million enemy vessels were vaporized in the expanding wave of destruction. 3 days later, Admiral Sullivan stood once again before the Galactic Council on Nexus Prime. But this time, the atmosphere was very different. The same alien representatives who had dismissed human military capabilities now looked at her with a mixture of respect, fear, and gratitude. Ambassador Lixon was the first to speak, his crystalline voice subdued. "Admiral Sullivan, the Confederation owes humanity a debt that can never be repaid. Your sacrifice and your methods have saved countless worlds from devourer consumption. High Counselor Vextai's telepathic voice carried genuine emotion. Admiral Sullivan, we called your people uncivilized because we did not understand. Your warriors fight not just with weapons, but with imagination, adaptability, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for others. These are not the traits of barbarians.